Hello and welcome to Colred Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Colred. I hope you're having a great day today. In this video, our second video of the day, we are going to be covering the 8 new champions that have been added to the game during this patch. It's a bit unusual, but we've actually got uncommons, new uncommons, which is great, and we've even got a new mythical. We've also got the duo for the fusion, Kaa The Who. I think this slate of champions is actually very interesting. So we're going to cover all of them because some of them will be available to everybody in the game. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. Just some quick channel business. We are in the midst of a subscriber push. We are trying for 5,000 subscribers before the end of 2023. So if you want to help us out, make sure to hit the like button on this video and any of the videos that you enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks for all the support. All right, so there are 8 new champions. We can see the list here, and we are going to start with the uncommons. So we have finally gotten 2 uncommons in the Sylvan Watchers faction. First is a Magic Affinity attack champion named Glenspear, and the second is a Spirit Affinity support named Branchweaver. Now, if we take a look at Glenspear here, I actually think his character model is pretty cool. Definitely a step above the normal skins for uncommons. He definitely looks more like a rare. So yeah, pretty cool looking uncommon. If we take a look at his stats strike me as uncommon stats. A little bit low on defense, a little bit low on HP, a little bit low on speed. Not totally trash stats, better than some stats that we've seen, but really not particularly good stats. His A1 has a single hit, but can place an extra hit if the target is under a weaken debuff. And then he brings a weaken debuff on his A2. It is the lesser weaken, but it's a 75% chance to land on a 3-turn cooldown and be up for 2 turns. So this is a pretty decent weaken from an uncommon. I don't think he's going to massively shift the power rankings of uncommon champions, but he's at least somewhat usable in the early game. The second uncommon here is Branchweaver. She looks a little bit more like an uncommon. Still not bad though. You know, the character model here is probably a little bit above average. I like some of the detailing on her chest piece and all the bones hanging out and her skirt and stuff. So definitely still a cool looking uncommon. Again, these stats are maybe a tiny bit better. The HP pool is at least legitimate. On the A1, has a chance to place an increased speed buff on an ally. The ally with the highest turn meter can't be this champion. That's kind of an interesting A1. We don't normally see something like that. And then on the A2, this is an AoE that has a 50% chance when booked of placing the lesser decreased speed debuff on all enemies for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. This skill is actually fairly solid and could be usable in faction crypts. So I think in this particular case, both of these uncommons are relatively in keeping with the uncommons we've seen in the game. Usable in places like faction crypts, but definitely not powerful enough. Like this, we have no new Armiger or Shield Guard here. So I don't think you have to worry about building up one of these uncommons to 6 stars at any point. So no new rares with this release, but there are 2 new epics. And so let's take a look at those 2. The first one is in the undead faction, and that is Ostrox. Now, Ostrox looks like an undead lizardman. That's kind of cool. He's got some bone wings here. He is a void epic. And if we look at his stats are decent. Decent HP pool, maybe a tad low. Good attack, good defense, good speed, some resistance and accuracy. So all around, no particular deficiencies in the stats. Nothing particularly jumps out as incredibly powerful, but for support, this is fairly standard for an epic. The A1 attacks one enemy, has a 100% chance when booked of transferring 1 random debuff from this champion to the target. Also heals the ally with the lowest HP by 10% of this champion's max HP. The damage here is based on attack, but this is an HP based skill in terms of the heal. This is actually a very strong A1. If you think of Pythion, Pythion is in the Lizardman faction. He's a legendary, and he was a fusion champion, and he's a very good legendary. And on his A1, he has a 2-hitter. Each hit heals the ally with the lowest HP by 5% of his max HP. So this skill, at least in terms of its effects, is stronger than Pythion's A1. And I think the heal will actually be smaller because Pythion has a larger HP pool. but this is a fairly powerful A1 on this Void Epic. The A2 is an AoE, it's on a 3-turn cooldown, and it has a 100% chance of placing block debuffs on each enemy for either 2 turns or 3 turns. So if you have 4 or more enemies alive, it's a 3-turn debuff on a 3-turn cooldown. This is going to be incredibly powerful in Hydra. When you have all the Hydra heads up, you can place a permanent, basically a permanent block buffs debuff on all of the heads. Again, Ostrux's Void Affinity, he's not going to weak hit. So you don't have to worry about that aspect. And this is a 100% chance to land. So build him with enough accuracy, and he's going to do a lot of work for you in places like Arena or against the Hydra clan boss. The A3 removes 1 random debuff from all allies and places an increased accuracy buff on them for 2 turns. This is on a 4-turn cooldown. Again, this could be particularly useful in Hydra clan boss. Maybe also in Arena. I think those are the 2 places we're likely to see this kit utilized first. And then we have this passive here. Whenever an enemy attempts to place a debuff on this champion, has a 20% chance to reflect it back onto the attacker. So again, Arena, potentially Hydra clan boss, and this might even be helpful against Bommel. So this epic seems really powerful. This is a good Void Epic. I think people are going to want this champion. They're going to want to build him out and use him in several places. I definitely expect to see him in Arena. I definitely expect to see him in Hydra clan boss. But we'll have to see, now that he's in the game, when people start pulling him, you know, where are they going to use him? We're going to experiment with him. I'm sure he's going to find a home in the meta somewhere. Now, the second epic is Nelor Ryblade in the High Elves faction. This guy actually looks like a repurposed rare skin. He's a little bit more shiny than a rare typically is, but yeah, I don't know if he feels like a great epic. Like, compared to those Sylvan Watchers uncommons, I actually think maybe he's a little bit disappointing. It's kind of cool looking. Anyway, let's take a look at his stats. Good attack, decent defense for an attack-based champion, okay speed at 98. HP pool is a tiny bit low, but let's look at his kit. His A1 is a 3-hitter. Each hit has a 40% chance when booked of placing a freeze debuff for 1 turn. I'm already thinking Fire Knight. 3 hitters, 3 chances to freeze. That's Fire Knight, both normal mode and hard mode dungeons. Yeah, that's a pretty solid A1. The A2 is a 4-hitter on a 3-turn cooldown. You'll have 2 chances at 75% to place a decrease attack, and then 2 more at a 75% chance to place a decrease accuracy debuff for 2 turns. Again, 4-hitter, I'm definitely thinking Fire Knight. This is, by the way, attacks 1 enemy 4 times. So this is going to be very useful in boss fights. But remember, this is not like a random hitter that could potentially spread around in wave content. Finally, he does have an AoE for wave content. It hits all enemies 2 times, and each hit has a 75% chance of placing decrease speed debuff for 2 turns, and then heals this champion by 30% of the damage dealt. So this looks like a really good all-around champion. If we see that he has good multipliers, he can be great in boss fights and in wave content, but I still think this guy is really a Fire Knight specialist. That decrease speed will play, the decrease attack will play, the freezes will play. So all of those, all the multi-hits will play in Fire Knight. This guy looks like a really strong Fire Knight champion. Finally, whenever an ally places a freeze debuff, this champion has a 30% chance to attack the target with their default skill, which of course is the 3-hitter that has an additional chance to place freeze. So yeah, absolutely, I'm thinking Fire Knight hard mode. This guy is going to be highly sought after for that particular dungeon. I think it's nice to have an epic level solution for the hardest dungeon in the game. Fire Knight hard mode is widely regarded as the hardest dungeon, and this could potentially allow some more players access to that dungeon. Okay, now let's take a look at the legendaries. We're going to start in the Ogren tribes, and there is a new Void legendary here. That is Bellator. Or Bellator, I suppose. So Void Legendary, we look at the stats. Stats are pretty solid. 22k HP, 1266 defense, 103 speed, and 50 base resistance. So not bad in terms of stats. This is an HP-based champion. The A1 attacks 1 enemy and has a 50% chance when booked of decreasing the cooldown of a random skill of the ally with the highest turn meter, except this champion, by 1 turn. That is a strange A1, but having an A1 that has a chance to decrease cooldowns, that's okay. At a 50% chance, it doesn't really feel legendary. Like if this were a 100% chance of decreasing a random skill of the ally with the highest turn meter, at least it would be reliable. But the weird thing about this is you have like 3 random things going on. It's a random chance to actually happen. It's an ally that you can't necessarily predict. Maybe the first time you can predict it, but turn meter is hard to track over multiple turns within the same fight. And then finally, the skill that actually gets the effect is random. So that's a whole lot of RNG going on. I would like them to take away one of these 3 RNG factors, and it just feels like it should be 100%. This is a Void Legendary. Okay, the A2 is an AoE, places an increased attack buff and an increased defense buff on all allies for 2 turns. Also heals all allies by 20% of this champion's max HP. And this is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked. This feels okay. Increased attack and increased defense on the same ability, plus a heal. That's a nice skill. It reminds me a little bit of Mithrala's, I think it's her A2 or her A3, but that's actually even stronger, right? It's an increased attack, increased defense, and I think you get the shield on that one. So not a bad skill, definitely usable in a lot of places. Here we have a revive. This is an AoE revive with 50% HP and 50% turn meter. Then places a shield buff on all revived allies for 2 turns, equal to 20% of this champion's max HP. So that's a solid revive. This is not an overwhelming revive. This is a good AoE revive. Again, this is a Void Legendary. So far, this feels just maybe like a regular Legendary, not a Void Legendary. Let's see what the passive does. Has a 50% chance of decreasing all of an ally's skill cooldowns by 1 turn whenever they are revived. You may never revive your champions. So this passive may literally never happen. Maybe occasionally in faction crypts. You would have to plan on somehow, and this is a 70% chance when booked. This seems like it should just be a passive that says 100% chance. It should be a 100% chance. It should just automatically decrease all of an ally's skill cooldowns by 1 turn when they are revived. I mean, Godseeker Aniri already has a revive that refreshes all of the cooldowns of the ally that gets revived. Now, hers is a single target revive, and this is an AoE, so I guess that if you're reviving multiple targets, you have multiple targets of the passive as well. But this seems like an underwhelming Void Legendary who's already in need of a buff. I don't think he's or she's going to get particular play in the game here. I think this is kind of a weak Legendary, weak Void Legendary. That's unfortunate. Okay, the second Legendary here is Krokmar, who is a Spirit Affinity Legendary in the Lizardman faction. Looking at the stats, good HP pool over 22,000, solid defense for an HP-based champion at 1112, and then good speed at 102 with a little bit of resistance there at 40. We have also got the extra crit damage here at 63%, so that's nice. So this might be more of a damage dealing HP-based champion as opposed to a support style HP-based champion. The A1 attacks one enemy, has a chance to attack all enemies 1 time if the first attack is critical. So we'll see what the multipliers are on this, but if the multipliers are good, this could be a very solid hit because that means the main target's going to get hit twice. And so if the multipliers are good, this could be a one-shot on squishy targets. So that's pretty nice, plus a little bit of extra AoE damage. Second skill is also an AoE, attacks all enemies, places a shield buff on this champion for 2 turns, equal to 20% of the damage inflicted. That's unusual for an HP-based champion. Usually it's based on their health. So we would hope that this damage would be significant then. Also heals this champion by 10% of their max HP for each critical hit. Now that's impressive. Against the Spiderlings, that could be 100% heal. Against Hydra Boss, could be 40% heal. Right now, it does have a chance to weak hit, so that would negate the potential for a critical hit. But yeah, this could be a really big heal, right? This is going to be a minimum of 10% if it crits, and could be a maximum of a full 100%, at least in Spiderling, or against the Spiderlings. But typically, it's going to be maybe 40% or 50% max HP heal. That's very nice. The A3 is not a hit, but it places increased crit rate and increased crit damage on all allies for 3 turns, and then grants an extra turn. This is on a 4-turn cooldown. But with the extra turn, it basically puts it on a 3-turn cooldown. So what's going to happen here is that allies are going to have these buffs up for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. Krokmar himself will drop the buff before everybody else will because of the extra turn mechanic. So Krokmar is going to be up 2 turns out of 4, but everybody else is going to be up 3 turns out of 3. And I guess he's really 2 turns out of 3 because of the extra turn. So yeah, this is going to be a very nice buff. That 3-turn duration is very solid. Plus, you have the extra turn. So this looks like a nuker. This looks like potentially an arena nuker, right? Because you can open with this ability, get the increased crit rate. So only build in the 70% crit rate. Get the increased crit rate and increased crit damage, and then go into this AoE that gives you a nice big shield and can heal you if you haven't gone first. So you could potentially put him on a go second team or a go first team, and it would work both ways. In addition, you want that crit rate for the A1 as well. So this could be a relatively different kind of champion here, damage dealing champion. If the multipliers are good, this could be an arena nuker. We don't have that many HP based arena nukers. There are a few, but this could be another one. Could also be really good in wave content. The shield and the heals will help him survive there. Let's look at the passive. Whenever this champion attacks, decreases the target's attack or defense by 5%, as well as the accuracy or resistance by 5%, depending on which stat is the highest. This is kind of interesting. Now, against most bosses have higher attack than defense. They always do. So this would lower the amount of damage that you would take from boss fights. Up to 30%. That's a significant decrease. So that could definitely extend your life in, say, clan boss, right? Or it could extend your life in Doom Tower fights against Doom Tower bosses. So any long, maybe even say like Iron Twins. This could be good in Iron Twins potentially, and can also reduce the resistance of bosses potentially, which would be nice. And since it's just a passive, this doesn't have a there's no accuracy requirement here. So this guy doesn't need any accuracy. I'm curious about his multipliers. I want to see his multipliers. This guy could be a faction war god, obviously. With 2 AoEs, you could put him in a stun set. He could be really good in arena. He's going to be really good in Doom Tower. Yeah, good champion. Good champion. Better than the Void legendary that we just looked at in the Ogryn faction. Okay, and finally we come to the Bannerlords faction, and we have Kaa The Who, who is the duo for Timit the Fool, which is the Halloween Fusion champion. So let's take a look at her kit and her stats. Her stats are solid. Basically 20k HP. She is a support-based champion, so 1321 defense and 112 speed. That's very fast. A little bit of extra resist at 40. So all in all, a fairly tanky support, which is nice to see, and also a fast support. She does have an aura of ally speed in all battles by 19%, which is always a nice, useful aura to have, so she could be your aura lead in places where you need her. Her A1 attacks one enemy, heals this champion by 10% of their max HP. If any Timits are on the same team, heals all of them by the same amount. So if you have multiple Timits, all of them will get a heal. Now this is basically the same as Timit's A1. His A1 heals himself by 10%, but I think it's a double hitter. So it might actually be a total heal of 20% instead of 10%. But so this is also a great solo A1. You're going to get a nice chunky heal every time you A1. So potentially this could be another solo champion, just like Timit could potentially be a solo champion. We'll have to experiment with them and see if that's possible. The A2 revives all dead allies with 50% HP and 50% turn meter, places increased crit rate and increased crit damage on them as well. And then if Timit the Fool is on the same team, if he's dead, he gets revived with full HP and full turn meter. If he's alive, this resets the cooldown and instantly activates their Kegs of Dread skill. Now, the Kegs of Dread is the AoE. It's the second AoE, I believe. So I don't know if it resets the cooldown and then activates it, if that puts it on cooldown again. We'll have to see. So potentially, if it doesn't put it on cooldown, what we could see is Timit the Fool could go first, AoE. Kaa The Who could use this, reset that cooldown, and activate it. So Timit the Fool AoEs. And then we get back to Timit the Fool on the next turn, and he's got that AoE again. So he could potentially do the same skill 3 times in 2 turns. So that seems like pretty good synergy between these duos. And we've already got 2 skills with synergy. And then here we've got a 3rd skill also with synergy. Fills the turn meter of all allies by 20%. Also removes 2 random debuffs from each ally. If Timid the Fool is on the same team, removes all debuffs from all allies. That feels weak. Then places a block debuffs buff on all allies for 1 turn. So I think that happens regardless of if Timid the Fool is on the team. So this feels like just a justification for getting another skill in here with Timid on in terms of synergy. Removes 2 random debuffs from each ally. Why not just be a full cleanse? A turn meter fill with a full cleanse, right? Why does it have to be a full cleanse only if Timid the Fool is on the team? That I don't like that. That just feels like making her less valuable without Timid. Okay, now let's look at the passive. All turn meter reduction effects are decreased by half when used against this champion. If Timid the Fool is on the same team, this champion is immune to turn meter reduction effects. When an enemy tries to decrease this champion's turn meter when Timid the Fool is on the same team, fills this champion's turn meter by the same percentage instead. So even without Timid the Fool, going to be harder to slow her down. But with Timid the Fool, when you try to reduce her turn meter, she gets more turn meter, and then she can jump ahead and potentially do some cool stuff, right? Because she's got this turn meter fill, so she could get her turn meter filled and then fill everybody else's turn meter and potentially cut in on an enemy team. So it does feel like Kaya and Timid the Fool are going to work very well together. And you'll notice neither one of them is a Void champion. So the likelihood of pulling Kaya is going to be a lot higher than if she were a Void legendary. By herself, she seems like a solid champion. With Timid the Fool, she seems like she could be very strong. And he's going to benefit from that as well. But the team will benefit from the additional synergy between these 2 champions. Okay, now here at the very end, we have the mythical champion. We saw the video with Lady Mikage that was released earlier this month, so we knew that she was coming. Her name is Crixa. She is Night Queen Crixa. Pretty cool base skin. I like the hair. I think it's fun. I like the armor and the outfit. Maybe not quite legendary level of appearance here. Definitely cool, but kind of feels like just a cool epic, right? Feels sort of on par with, like, I don't know, like Ursula, or, you know, there are a couple of other epics who are closer. Maybe just enough with the hair to push it over into the legendary territory, but this is a mythical champion. Of course, then we transform her. The animation's pretty cool, but now we've got a mythical level skin here. This is an incredibly cool skin. This is even cooler, I think, than like Lydia the Death Siren skin. So this is a mythical level of artwork here. With the blue flame hair and the kind of raven wings flapping and all of, yeah, definitely a cool outfit. So kind of interesting, almost like she's a little bit too subtle here, like just kind of hiding in the background. You're like, what's this champion? She's not that important. And all of a sudden you transform her and you're like, oh God, it's the Angel of Death. We're all screwed. Yeah, so kind of a cool mix of aesthetics there. And I think it does work. So let's go ahead and look at her stats and her kit. Nice HP, nice attack, defense, good speed for support. This is lower than the speed we've seen on most of the other mythicals, who seem to be mostly running at 115. Some of them are slower, but I think more of them are at 115 that aren't. So a little bit slower here. Let's look at the abilities. A1 is a 2-hitter. Each hit has a chance of increasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn. So you've got a 75% chance of decreasing the duration of all debuffs on the target by 1 turn on an A1. That's pretty solid. Again, I like to point out that A1s for the mythical champions may be used a little bit less than the A1s of other champions because they all have 3 active skills. And so, you know, sometimes plus the transform ability. I don't know. Maybe they'll still use their A1 just as often. But that is something to consider. Like, how valuable is the A1 going to be? We'll have to see. Now, the A2 places a decreased resistance debuff and a buffs debuff on all buffs debuff. I can say that. Places a block buffs debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. Also decreases each target's turn meter by 20%. It's on a 3-turn cooldown when booked, but we know that these books are hard to get. So this is not a hit. You can't weak hit here. So as long as you have the accuracy, and again, in the first book, ignores 20% of the resistance of the target. So decrease resistance and block buffs. This seems to empower other debuffers, right? Now, the decrease of turn meter is also useful. So that's kind of interesting. Interesting skill. The A3 is an AoE, removes all buffs from all enemies, and increases the cooldown of all enemy skills by 3 turns. So that's a cooldown lockout. And this can't be cleansed. This is not a debuff. This is not a block active skills. This just literally puts everything on cooldown for 3 turns. That's incredibly powerful. This is like a god tier ability. There are, I think, 2 champions in the game other than this champion that do this. There might be 3. All right, so one of the big champions that does this is the Void Legendary Yumiko, who decreases the cooldown of all ally skills by 3 turns and then increases the cooldown of all enemy skills by 3 turns. So this is an extremely powerful skill for the Night Queen, Crixa. So very strong skill here. Plus it's a full cleanse, plus it's an AoE. We don't know how hard she's going to hit. Her damage is based on attack, and her attack numbers are okay. She's a support champion. But yeah, that seems like a good ability. Now let's check out her passive. She's immune to stun debuffs. That's very nice. And then increases this champion's accuracy by 1 for every 2 resistance they have. That's not bad. Now, it's a little bit strange, because why would you want to pile on resistance onto somebody who's already immune to stun debuffs, right? Like, if you're going to pile on resistance, you don't need the immunity to stun debuffs. It feels like this is an out. Like, you can get out of piling resistance onto her. But she is a support champion. You're not going to want her to be stunned or CC'd. She has a full cleanse. So just like every other cleanser, she's going to highly value resistance. And so she gets additional accuracy, which is nice for her resistance. All right, now let's transform her and take a look at her alternate form skills. Her A1 attacks 2 times, has a 50% chance of decreasing the duration of all debuffs on a random ally by 1 turn. I think this is a mirror skill. Chance of decreasing the duration of debuffs. Chance of increasing the duration of debuffs. Okay, so her base form is a debuffer. Does have the cleanse, but also has the lockout. So her base form feels like a debuffer. Is her alternate form a buffer? That's kind of like a mini cleanse. Block debuffs buff and increase resistance buff on all allies. Fills turn meter of all. These are all mirror skills. Instead of decreasing the turn meter of enemies, increases the turn meter of allies. So this one will also probably be a mirror skill. Removes all debuffs from all allies and then decreases the cooldown of all ally skills except this champion's by 3 turns. So this is like Yumiko's skill, but split up between the 2 halves, right? On one half, on the base form, increases cooldown of enemies, and then on the alternate form, decreases the cooldown of all allies. So kind of a cool juxtaposition there between the two forms. And then the second passive is immune to sleep debuffs, increases this champion's speed by 1 for every 10 resistance they have. So we already know we're going to be stacking resistance onto this champion. So potentially if you can get 500 resistance on this champion, you can get an additional 50 speed. Now that means this form will be 50 speed faster than the other form. I don't know why that's valuable. But this is also a cleanse, removes all debuffs from all allies. So you have a cleanse in both forms, right? Here in the base form, removes all buffs from all enemies. Oh, removes all buffs from all enemies. This is not a cleanse. I'm sorry. This has a block buffs, debuff. All right, so I messed up before. So the cleanse is on the buffer. So there's a debuffer half and a buffer half. And this removes all debuffs from all allies. So this is the cleanse, not 2 cleanses. All right, fair enough. Very cool champion. Very strong champion. Anybody that's got a lockout on cooldowns is very strong. Anybody who's got a chance to decrease cooldown of ally skills, especially by 3 turns, this is a reset champion. Now, if you have a 5-turn or a 6-turn cooldown, this won't get you a full reset. But another reset champion out there, it kind of makes sense. I don't think we had one in the mythical rarity yet. So this is going to be an upgrade to Yumiko or an upgrade to Kaimar or something like that, at least in the overall kit with the stats and everything included. Very cool champion, cool visuals. Never going to get her probably. She's a mythic. But if you happen to be one of the lucky few who gets her from a primal shard, this is probably going to be the best champion in the game as of today. I don't know that there's a better champion than this in the game. I mean, there, especially as a support, you know, there are still other champions that do things that she doesn't do, but this is a crazy good kit that can be used pretty much everywhere. She's going to be used in PvP. She's going to be used in PvE. Yeah. And she's going to be, you know, hard to take off the board with the nice stats that she has. So if you get her, enjoy her. Okay, so that is it. 8 new champions from uncommon all the way up to mythical. I think there's some cool champions here. I think there are a couple of epics who are really good. I think the new duo is actually tempting. And so I am actually thinking that I'm going to go for Timid the Fool on my main account, just in case I pull a Kaya. I think that duo could be really interesting in lots of places. Anyway, let me know what you think. Does Kaya's kit improve your overall opinion of Timid and make it more likely that you're going to go for the Timid fusion? Or does it not matter to you at all? You just don't think he's good enough to worry about. Also, what do you think about that Void Legendary? Didn't feel Void Legendary to me. Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and consider joining our Discord community. Thanks for hanging out. I've been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.